Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Isis, All That Glitters. The goddess next door takes on a bikini-clad bank robber in this action-packed all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, All That Glitters in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Most Milestone Comics fans have been anticipating the return of Milestone Comics ever since 2015, when it was announced that Milestone Comics was going to return in a relaunch called Milestone 2.0. Now, Milestone Comics was the publishing company that produced a series of comic books that featured black superheroes in a universe that was revolving around characters of color. And this universe, which was created by the late, great Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cowan, Michael Davis, and Derek Dingle, has had a cult following among comic fans for over 25 years. And those comic fans were anticipating a big return with this Milestone 2.0 relaunch that was announced back in 2015, with new titles slated for release in the spring of 2018. Unfortunately, from the looks of things, we may never see a Milestone comic ever again, and it's due to issues as related to the business of the owners of Milestone Comics and DC Comics and the estate of Dwayne McDuffie. Now, there were plans to relaunch Milestone Comics under that Milestone 2.0 banner. However, all of those plans were derailed as a lawsuit was filed by Charlotte McDuffie, the widow of Dwayne McDuffie, alleging that it cut Dwayne McDuffie's estate out of the deal. And this was something that should have been dealt with by the founders of Milestone, Derek Dingle, Reginald Hudlin, and Dennis Cowan, before they even went to go and work with DC Comics as related to publishing and distribution. There should have been a deal to either buy out Dwayne McDuffie's estate or try to compensate Dwayne McDuffie's estate so that his widow could receive fair compensation for Dwayne McDuffie's creations and Dwayne McDuffie's intellectual property. And it is just unethical to think that they would try to cut Dwayne McDuffie out of the Milestone universe that he created and his intellectual property, because if it wasn't for Dwayne McDuffie, we would not have characters like Static or Icon, and we would not have many of the stories that founded the overall Milestone universe, because your Dwayne McDuffie was one of the architects who created the structures of the Milestone universe, and he created many of the characters in that universe and helped co-create characters like your Cobalt with writers like John Rossum. So your Dwayne McDuffie and his estate was deserving of some sort of compensation for the work that he produced, and his family and estate deserved to be compensated for that work. So when I look at that decision to seemingly cut Dwayne McDuffie out of the deal, that's something that I see as extremely unfair to the estate of the late great Dwayne McDuffie. And there should have been efforts made by all of the parties involved, your Dennis Cowan, your Derek Dingle, your Reginald Hudlin, and even DC Comics, towards making sure that Dwayne McDuffie's widow and his estate were compensated fairly through making sure that the estate got royalties from the reprints of older books and from the use of the characters in new books. So when I look at this whole situation as related to Milestone 2.0, I see where there were some issues as related to the business, and this was stuff that should have been worked out between the parties as related to the business, and it's really sad that no one really is making efforts to try to resolve this issue, because many comic fans out here, we have been waiting patiently for the relaunch of the Milestone universe, and I believe that the relaunch of the Milestone universe could lead to huge sales for the comic book industry and many of these struggling shops, because right now African American fantasy, science fiction, and comic books are at an all-time high as related to popularity, and many of those fans who were young back in the 1990s are in their 20s and 30s right now, and many of those comic fans, they are would be eager to go out here and pick up a Milestone 2.0 comic, but unfortunately, because the parties who own the Milestone intellectual property are too busy arguing with each other, they can't capitalize on the opportunity to go out here and reach that new customer base. And this is another sad opportunity that is being missed by the comic book industry, which is already suffering as numerous comic shops close and numerous comic shops are struggling to stay in business. And this could be that Milestone 2.0 could have been an opportunity to reach new customers and bring new business to those comic shops. Unfortunately, because these parties are too busy arguing and squabbling, they don't see that they are missing an opportunity and that the window is slowly closing on them to reach those new customers and reach and have an opportunity to reach that marketplace, which is growing. And we're seeing many independent comic publishers out here. They're taking advantage of the market and getting their characters to the marketplace, and we're seeing many fantasy writers like myself getting their products to the marketplace, a marketplace that, ironically, Milestone Media helped lay the foundation for. But because these parties can't work together, they can't build on the momentum that they helped establish to show that there was an audience for African American superheroes and that there was a marketplace of customers ready to buy comic books and properties featuring black superheroes. Because if it wasn't for Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cowan, and Michael Davis and Derek Dingle laying that foundation for black superheroes to start heading down the road to becoming mainstream intellectual properties, we would not see so many black creators like myself being able to go out here and build on that foundation. And we wouldn't have, a lot of us would not have been inspired unless we went out here to buy Milestone Comics like I did back in the 1990s when I was in college. I would go to a black comic vendor and I would go buy comics almost every week, picking up I remember buying the first issues of Hardware, Icon, Static, and the Blood Syndicate from that vendor, and I remember picking them up regularly from that vendor on Fordham Road because this was the first time I saw black superheroes, and I loved seeing superheroes that looked like myself and stories that presented my experience and the experiences of brothers and sisters out there. And it was one of those things that inspired me as a creator to go out here and want to go out and create my own characters later on in the 90s when I was doing the first John Haynes story back in like 94 or 95, and when I started doing ISIS in 1999, one of the inspirations for the ISIS character was the Icon series, and the Icon series really gave me perspective on racism in the South, and it was one of those things that influenced me towards writing chapters in Isis's life where she had to deal with racism and Jim Crow, because I got those ideas primarily from reading the Icon comic book, which dealt with Augustus Freeman, the brother from another planet experiencing racism and slavery. And I got those ideas from Milestone Comics. And I always wanted to be a contributor to Milestone Comics back in the day. I even remember applying for a job for Milestone Comics. I sent them a query letter back in 1994-95. But the company, I didn't know the company was struggling at the time, but I wanted to be a part of the Milestone Comics business back then. But sadly, the Milestone Comics business, original business, died in 1997, and I believe it never got a chance to actualize its potential, because when I looked at Milestone back in my early 20s, I was saying to myself, there needed to be more types of more contemporary characters like a John Haynes, and I really saw a marketplace for a book featuring a heroine like Isis, and I always thought I could have brought those characters over to Milestone. But sadly, the Milestone Comics company went out of business in 97, and it looks like almost 27 years later, we may never see a Milestone comic return to the marketplace, because we have these founders arguing with each other over these rights that were supposed to be sold, and we have DC Comics, which I believe was extremely disingenuous, not really making a serious good faith effort to try to buy out Dwayne McDuffie's shares, because in between the original founders, they could have worked something out between themselves and Dwayne McDuffie's widow. And I believe DC Comics could have done something to make efforts to work something out with Dwayne McDuffie's widow towards making sure that Dwayne McDuffie's heirs receive fair compensation for his intellectual property, and that intellectual property would be treated with the respect it deserves. Because when I look at Milestone Media from a publisher's perspective, I see a lot of great potential for the Milestone Comics brand, and I see a great opportunity for Milestone to grow, because in today's marketplace of African American fantasy, science fiction, manga, and even literature like Black Goth literature, I see a marketplace that is growing, and I see an opportunity to make millions of dollars by bringing back these Milestone characters, and I see a marketplace that could grow and expand with the right leadership in charge. And I, as a guy who has vision for a bigger perspective for Milestone Comics, I really think that all of these parties could have easily worked this out, and they could have gotten those comics to the marketplace in 2018. Instead, they're playing the finger point game and trying to make Charlotte McDuffie, Dwayne McDuffie's late widow, look like the bad guy. But I look at all parties and I see it as them not really understanding how important it was to settle this issue, because when I look at it, there was something more important here as related to the black image, the black experience, and an effort should have been made to try to get these characters back to the marketplace rather than leave these great characters in limbo, because leaving them in limbo, I don't think that's something Dwayne would want to see. And I don't think Dwayne would want to see these characters, these great characters like Static, like Icon, like Hardware, and even some members of the Blood Syndicate left in a creative limbo where talented writers could never get an opportunity to work with them or make efforts to bring these characters to a new generation of readers, and an effort to really get these characters to reach that new generation of readers in fun, fantastic adventures. I know if I were to get the money to get the rights to the Milestone catalog, I know what I would do. I would be getting ready to do a Milestone launch, and I would really want to make it something big and grand, and I would want to make it something fun and accessible to the old readers of the Milestone universe, and something fresh for the new readers of the next generation. And what's really sad is all of these great characters are not being utilized by Milestone Media, nor are they being used by DC Comics. And what's sad is that they are desperately needed in a struggling comic book industry, because I believe a Milestone 2.0 with the right creative people could be one of the things that could get the comic book industry out of the slump it's in right now. And while there is no Milestone right now, I'm hoping that people go out here and pick up a lot of other great black comics out here, like Chris Brown's Omega Black, or Raymond Leonard's Agent Solo, or you take a look at Mike Williams' Deke Sledge comic strip, because those are a lot of great black comics that are out right now, and they need your support, just like the SJS Direct imprint needs your support, because I'm going to get ready to launch the first ISIS graphic novel as soon as I can get enough money to fund it. And if you guys could donate to the Patreon, I would really appreciate it. And if you want to try some of the books in the SJS Direct universe, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, E-Steam Goddess of. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a demonic dominatrix in this action-packed all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Goddess of in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.